Hey guys, I hope you like Sherlock Gnomes, because this guy is talking about Sherlock Gnomes. So enjoy. I'm gonna try out Doran's, this thing.
Sherlock Gnomes is a movie that was released. I guess so many people were clamoring for a sequel.
I got
to,
countered. They took Swain so I could go Swain, and they took Mouse so that I would get countered.
A bunch of panicked executives got together after realizing their animated movie ideas drawer was completely empty, and as a result, greenlit this. The original film had a tiny budget for an animated movie of only $36 million, and somehow made a whopping $193 million worldwide for some reason. I guess gnomes were popular in 2011 or something. I didn't realize these films were so ridiculously English. All of you viewers outside of the UK must assume that us Brits love David Beckham, the Beatles, fish and chips, and I guess gnomes? I don't think I've ever actually seen a garden gnome in person before. Who owns them? They're the most tasteless, kitschy, unattractive looking things, and I don't understand why anyone likes them, let alone why anyone would think that it would be a good idea to make not one movie, but 2 movies about garden gnomes. Well, 3 if you count Gnome Alone, which I guess was trying to cash in on some of that gnome blood money.
I'm Liam, strong and silent. I like it.
Oh, and how could I forget Gnomes and Trolls, The Secret Chamber? Am I in a living nightmare right now, or is what I'm looking at somehow a real movie? Anyway, I'll have to save that one for another time. Romeo and Juliet was pretty bad on its own. It's quite literally a beat-for-beat retelling of Romeo and Juliet, except the characters are garden gnomes. The scene where Juliet commits suicide after Romeo poisons himself seemed a little much for a kids movie though. At the time of me writing this, I watched the first movie a day ago, and I remember nothing about it aside from an annoying frog commenting on how Juliet has a huge ass.
Nice junk in the trunk.
Anyway, Sherlock Gnomes, this is the real meat and potatoes. With a name that clever and hilarious, how could it fail? If you want one good example of why this film failed, let me go to its IMDb page and show you what kind of images they have available to show off the movie. Oh god. Somebody thought this was a good idea. Luckily for the hacks who made this movie, Sherlock Holmes is in the public domain, so the film effectively writes itself. You don't have to think of anything original. That didn't stop them from making some hilarious jokes about other possible titles or sequels though.
I know, Game of Gnomes.
Even the Gnome Ranger
Oh, the Gnome Ranger
gets a shout out. Remember that? Nope. No you don't. What proceeds in the exact same way that Romeo and Juliet is just Romeo and Juliet with gnomes is a pretty typical Sherlock Holmes story, but every character, you guessed it, is a gnome. Because funny?
What the
You know what, I'd be fine with a child-friendly animated Sherlock Holmes movie. Why do they have to be gnomes, exactly? Oh yeah, that's why. Of course, when you have Sherlock Gnomes, you also have to have his arch-nemesis, Moriarty.
Moriarty. Moriarty?
They couldn't think of a funny pun for his name, so he's just Moriarty. Who in this film is a pie mascot, who often looks more like one of the emojis from the Emoji Movie than whatever he's supposed to be here.
You enjoy our little game as much as I do.
Once Gnomes defeats Moriarty in the opening scene, he's rude to Watson and then the sequence ends. My excitement levels couldn't quite control themselves when we were finally reintroduced to the beloved cast from the first movie. You got this hilarious one, and this guy, and how could I forget about this crazy mother right here?
I'm okay. Excuse me.
Oh, Mankini, that is just...
Why does that do so much damage?
Sorry, I'm just getting too hyped about this. It's hard to stay calm and collected when talking about my favorite gnomes from the GCU. Whoever owns the gnomes moved house because they're in a new garden compared to the first one, and they no longer segregate gnome kind based on the color of their hats. There's a pretty important and totally justified subplot where one of the gnomes is in love with the annoying frog, but he doesn't tell her that he's in love with her because conflict. You need conflict.
Oh, I think someone's got a crush on someone.
Maybe.
This frog is probably the worst character in any movie. Just screams every line and just never shuts up. Just please be quiet. I know kids are stupid and this film is clearly made for stupid kids, but I reckon even baby IHE would have been pissed off by this frog. Frog bad. Frog very bad.
Lord Redbrick and I are officially retiring.
Retiring from what? What do you do? You're gnomes. The world building is so lazy in these gnome movies, and I know this might sound
killing
like
him
a
in
weird,
CS somehow, what the
ridiculous
fuck?
complaint considering what we're talking
What is
about
going on?
here, but if you're going to be completely indifferent about the rules and regulations of this gnome universe, then why didn't you just make a straightforward Sherlock Holmes movie that was animated with humans? Because Sherlock Holmes is a human. The gnomes operate in a very similar way to how the toys in Toy Story do. The concept being that gnomes have their own society
Second
and
me,
have
Steph.
wars with each other and race lawnmowers around when they're not being looked at. But whereas Toy Story is consistent within the confines of its own rules, in the gnome universe, pretty random things can just come to life depending on what funny scenes the writers could think of. If it was just gnomes, then that would be fine,
smells
I
might be
guess.
new.
But you've got statues, gargoyles, and later on it just straight up turns into Toy Story. I know I probably harp on about this kind of thing way too much, but I find it genuinely frustrating when films are so transparently lazy about the way their rules and world building works. Watson and gnomes have another argument, and the true plot of the movie unravels. Garden gnomes are being stolen from people's homes, and it's up to Sherlock to find out where they've gone. Honestly, if you can get
I have
past the
0
fact that
stacks on my
Sherlock
mana
and
flow.
Watson are gnomes, the scenes with them are just fine.
I guess it
do have
doesn't count if
soft
he has
spot
a
for these
shield up.
characters and the dynamic they have, though. There are even some entertaining sequences where Sherlock goes into his mind
see if that
palace,
matters.
like in the BBC show. There's some nice 2D animation, which makes me wish the whole film was just 2D animation, but that don't sell no more, so we got 3D. Nothing's particularly original, but at least it's something for me to latch onto. At least that is something with creative input. Romeo and Juliet, however, who remember are actually in this movie, have nothing to do in the film at all. So their arc is that they fall out with each other because Juliet is more interested in cleaning the garden over spending time with Romeo.
There will be plenty of time for us after I get the garden ready.
Unbelievable!
Again, highlighting how there were clearly no ideas for this movie, so most of the time they just go through the motions. Movies need to have conflict, so let's take the two characters who have absolutely nothing to do and put them through the same arc basically every character in any hack film like this goes through. Wow, that's really
Yeah,
fun.
that does give me stacks.
Insane. The
That's
two sets of characters
amazing.
clash when the main set of gnomes is mysteriously stolen from the garden just before
Come on,
Sherlock
keep
arrives.
pushing.
From here, the film is basically just an episode of Sherlock, but with every character being a
Do,
garden
do,
gnome,
do,
or other random
do,
ornaments or toys. Also, obviously, with Romeo and Juliet thrown in for good measure, because it had to be a sequel. There's an action scene in a sewer, a chase scene in Chinatown, a bunch of clues and mysteries are discovered. There's a strange scene where a doll has a musical number, and this isn't a musical. It's weirdly reminiscent of a scene from the terrible sci-fi film Valerian. It had Rihanna in it. Watson is killed by a gargoyle, and then
Nice
Romeo
Wilhelm.
gets kidnapped. However, we discover that the gnomes are all fine and are having a dance
so
party.
afraid.
Because it wouldn't be a bad animated movie without a bunch of dancing. There's something even more dastardly as a
Oh, wow.
thought. It's
Okay,
revealed
that's
that
actually good.
Watson was actually
job,
responsible
guys.
for the gnomes disappearing all along.
Why are there 3 of them?
No, Sherlock. Not Moriarty.
Watson?
Because he was just so sick of Sherlock ignoring him and not taking him seriously as a sidekick. And it was the only way to get him to pay attention.
This was the only way to get through to Sherlock.
Seems like a lot of work. But then in an even more surprising turn of events, it's revealed that the gargoyles don't actually work for Watson. They actually work for Moriarty, who didn't die at the beginning. So
To be fair, it is needlessly complicated, but that's what supervillains do.
So then there's a 20-minute action scene where Sherlock fights Moriarty and Romeo and Juliet fly around on a drone. Of course they win, all the gnomes are returned home, and at 1 hour 17 minutes the film ends. Barely even a feature film.
No Sherlock.
Honestly, I'd be fine with the existence of this movie if they cut out all of the Romeo and Juliet scenes and had it be a straight-to-DVD Sherlock Holmes 15 to 30-minute short for kids. But no, of course that's not enough. That doesn't have the potential of being profitable enough. Somehow, through some black magic, the people behind this film managed to make a film that's barely over an hour feel bloated and overly long. There's clearly no passion or creativity behind the inception of this movie. It's like it was made by an algorithm, a computer-generated product which only exists to try to squeeze out money from kids and grandmas. And this really is a grandma movie, with mostly safe, predictable humor, apart from a weird Willy joke.
Don't call me Tony D.
And a nepotism one.
Hooray for nepotism!
I guess that's for the adults. With cute, adorable characters and not much at stake. I could imagine this being put on at Christmas for me when I was 7 years old to try and keep me quiet for an hour. That's not really the kind of thing the production companies would put on the box art, would they? You're probably looking at this and wondering if this really is Search for the Worst worthy. I find it so inoffensive that it's kind of hard to get that angry over. This is probably mostly due to how competent the quality of the animation is. Fidelity, character design, aside from Moriarty, who looks terrible. And expression in the animation is top-notch considering the budget they had, especially considering the ridiculous voice cast they have. We probably collectively took half the budget. It can be annoyingly over-animated and strangely bare at points. But the team of artists really had nothing to work with. The setting really is the most restrictive thing about it. It's so played out and overdone at this point. But doing anything new and fresh with such a stagnant idea would require so much work that it wouldn't be worth it, considering the context of what we're talking about here. It's what irritates me the most about this film existing. Imagine this team of clearly capable animators being put to work on something spawned from an actual idea, from creators with a passion and a story they actually wanted to tell. It's a film that exists out of obligation, a corporate predictable secretion straight from the bumhole of a money-hungry desperate studio. One of the more interesting aspects about this movie is that the appalling advertising might be what actually killed it in the end. There are certainly much worse films than this one that make plenty of money at the box office. If you've seen the trailer, you'll probably know what I mean. It's probably one of the worst trailers I've seen in recent years. They purposefully cut the footage to make the film look worse than it is, which I'm surprised didn't actually work.
We're too late. We'll need a ship. No ship, Sherlock. Is he even listening to me? He's not listening, look.
I do like that guy.
That's not how a squirrel shakes its behind. Mankini, can you demonstrate?
For future reference,
That's not how a squirrel wags its tail. This is.
When I went to
That
see
went through
Isle
the
of
shield,
Dogs in
I
the
think.
cinema, the audience I was with laughed more at the trailer for Sherlock Gnomes than they did for the feature they were there to watch. So I thought this was going to be a slam dunk financially. I guess putting Sherlock Gnomes and Romeo and Juliet into posters of better and more famous movies somehow didn't make the film a success. Go figure. Sherlock Gnomes is about as good an idea as B-movie, which despite the healthy amount of memes it spawned, is a baffling, creatively bankrupt abomination of a film that should have stayed being a 2-sentence long joke and nothing more. It leaves you with no questions other than why? Why did they sink so much money into this when it was a terrible idea from the get-go and it flopped as a result? Why did they get big-name actors like Johnny Depp and Chiwetel Ejiofor for a movie like this? Why is every song in the movie an Elton John song? Why did anyone spend years assembling this pointless film about Sherlock Holmes' gnomes? Why does this film exist? Thanks for watching. Subscribe. And subscribe to Jar Media. And subscribe to Sardonicast. See ya. I played the original Destiny for a grand total of 60 days, 6 hours and 24 minutes. I really can't tell you why I did. I think I was depressed at the time. I would do a deal with the devil in a heartbeat to get those 2 months back, but unfortunately, that's not how real life works. So before you say I'm not qualified to talk about Destiny in a critical light, which people have genuinely told me before, up in the corner of the screen there's a nice little X you can press if you can already feel your blood boiling. Go away. At the time of me writing this, I've spent 1 day, 12 hours and 42 minutes in Destiny 2, which I think is plenty to give the game a fair rap. So many people have asked me what I think of Destiny 2, and I've stayed pretty tight-lipped until now. Let me give you the short version before I get more in depth. My expectations for Destiny 2 were meteorically low, and I was still left dissatisfied. I wanted to stop playing on the second planet. The story isn't nearly as good as people are saying it is, but at the same time I think if vanilla Destiny launched in the same state of Destiny 2, no one would have really complained in the same way they they did about the original Destiny. Yes, I know, I didn't like it. Ha ha ha, I hate everything, didn't like something. That's not predictable at all. Suppose you can decide for yourself if you think it's because I'm burnt out on the series or because the game is actually
did a lot of damage.
flawed. I'm sure you'll let me know, even if I don't want to hear it. Destiny 2 is bigger, louder, more epicer, more funnier, more cinematic, more repetitive, more Destiny-er than ever before. It's a game designed for two types of people. The first being Destiny fans who will accept anything with the name on it, and the second are people who like first-person shooters, grinding
My house
loot-based
smells
games,
like burning.
and don't mind general repetitive Ubisoft-style mission design and collectathons. Unfortunately, if you're like me and you find the art style, world design, and science fantasy universe to be the biggest draw, this is not the game for you. Well, unless you also fit into the two groups we just established. At the very least, I was
Hey,
hoping for the story content to live up to the promise of being a rich cinematic campaign.
Even
Buzzword,
+5
buzzword,
max health.
buzzword. Just like it says on the
Hey,
back
that
of the
cube
box.
did
I
some
guess if by
damage.
rich they meant vapid, and by cinematic they mean
People that don't have
there are
magic
cutscenes
shields.
that show things that kind of look like a movie, then I guess they'd be right on the money.
Yes. Yes.
Destiny 2 starts in a weird place.
Okay.
There is only one character people care about, that being Nathan Fillion's character Cade 6. This is evident by Cade 6 being the main focus of the marketing. Meanwhile, basically everything else in the game is completely expendable.
Oh wait, that's an enemy. I didn't even notice.
We were much more powerful. But that was long ago.
In fact, a reboot would actually have been much easier to work with in terms of story and narrative, because it is such a hilarious mess.
We'll end the beginning.
Alright, I'm doing some stuff, kind of.
We start the game with a bunch of characters
Technically.
we don't care about in a world we hardly know against enemies we don't really understand. I have so little knowledge about the way Destiny works in terms of lore
I'll
that I
stay
might as well
even though
know
I
nothing.
get
And this is
bots.
coming from someone who has played Destiny for over 1,000 hours. Oh yeah, and if you feel compelled to combat some of my points about the narrative with a sentence that begins with any of these following things, in the lore, in the grimoire, on the wiki, I want you to shut up and go away because in my opinion that does not count. Of course there should be a way to expand your knowledge of a universe you want to know more about, but if it's not presented in the game in an obvious way, I do not
Brand's so
consider it part
thirsty.
of the story that the majority of people will experience.
But it actually
To my utter
works for him,
disbelief,
what the
there
heck?
is still no Mass Effect style codex page in any of the menus of Destiny 2. Some things give you the option to read or scan extra details about them, but it's rare
I
and
almost
few and
walked
far
into that
between
W.
the constant. Say for example I wanted a quick recap of what the Hive enemy type are all about. If there was a codex, I'd happily have a read to refresh my memory, but I guess typing some text and adding a tab in a menu would be too much work. It's not like it's been 3 years since the first game or anything. I'm going to be spoiling the single player campaign now. You've been warned. When you load up the game, you're greeted with Nolan North's unfiltered ghost voiceover.
I never knew you in life. Your first life, anyway. You
Yeah,
died
I'm
on a
very
battle
worried about the
long
first turret
before
on
my
top.
time.
I actually much prefer how he sounds without the ghost sound effects. His voice actually has texture and holds much more emotion without the constant bleeps and bloops.
They called it the Traveler. And when it arrived, it changed your world forever. It was a golden age. And for centuries, humanity thrived. Until it didn't.
Nice to see the god-awful atrocious writing is back in full force. And that's basically the same line I criticised in the last Destiny content called Rise of Iron.
I didn't even know someone with the Traveler's Gift could die.
Wait, did I just have health here? I wasn't paying
Until it
attention.
didn't.
Until they did.
Until it didn't.
Until they
No!
Just
I missed
pitifully
the
bad.
big minion.
An ancient enemy pursued the Traveler
missed out on
across the
AP.
universe.
The opening serves as a very basic setup for the world of Destiny that slightly retcons the original game.
The Traveler had an enemy. A darkness which had hunted it for eons
miss.
across the black gulfs of space.
In the original game, the all-knowing bad guy was simply known as
Yeah, this
the
brand is
Darkness,
super good.
which was personified
Or
as
fed.
black sludge
Well,
that
I mean,
inhabited 3
You have
Vex
to be good to get
robots.
fed, right? Or lucky. Either way, he's fed. And we can take mid, I think, all the way to the
Killed
end.
it. Now the Darkness is simply referred to as giant triangles that were an ancient enemy. Thank God the blobs of darkness are triangles now at least. They're gradually evolving into shapes that children can understand. Finding out what the Traveler is and giving more explanation as to how this universe functions is what I was hoping Destiny 2 would do at the very least. But all you get are annoying teasers and a Marvel-style credit stinger that shows the giant triangles that I remember seeing in some concept art once. I guess we'll be seeing them in Destiny 3. This game doesn't want you to know because they're more interested in showing you the boring bad guy who's coming to kill everyone you don't care about. That's much more important. There's a bombastic cutscene where the tower from the first game that houses Cade 6 and the other people you're supposed to care about is attacked. There's a neat shot of a strange machine enveloping itself over the Traveler. It's suitably menacing and it does the job. Your character is introduced in a cutscene where you're flying back to the tower.
I wasn't sure if there were minions here, which is why I didn't walk through tower, although I think that would have been safer with the set.
Communication seems to be down at the tower.
What is going on back there?
You arrive to everything being in utter chaos. You find out that an elite section of the Cabal called the Red Legion have invaded the tower with the intent of harnessing the power of the Traveler for themselves. They're led by a big goofy-looking marshmallow called Ghoul, who we'll discuss in a second. You fight your way through the tower in a fun, fan-servicey way and wind up in a spaceship with a shipwright.
When you're driving.
If your shirt isn't tucked into your pants, are your pants tucked into your shirt?
That's not the greatest engage, but I can respect it.
Alright, Guardian. Time to kick them where it hurts.
Oh, hell yeah. They finally introduced some kind of dogfighting with our ships. Are our ships gonna do something?
Oh my gosh, the exhaust didn't... The exhaust doesn't affect the hull?
Footage from a game I actually like. This is what
Are you
actually
serious?
happened.
Did 800 true damage roll exhausted?
Let us know
it's a troll.
We'll hit that ship with everything we got.
True damage sucks.
You're tasked with getting the shields down from the inside of the Red Legion command ship so the other Guardians can blow it up or something. You do a whole lot of... and end it by... ing the shield generator and then fleeing the ship.
Can't flash justice. But I could have ulted him first, because we had the same ult.
You don't. Welcome to a world without light.
Fun fact, you need light to see.
Guardian, something's wrong.
Pet me horse. Pet me horse. I wanted to ult him, but instead I was the one that got ulted. See the house smite? Yeah, baby. Alright, Kaisa's the only one left. Ooh, she fast. Got her invisible.
You wake up with your movement
Am I
inhibited
faster
in a
than
scene
me?
very reminiscent of Mass Effect 3. I'm not sure if it was intentional or not, but a lot of this game reminds me of Mass Effect 3. The opening with a surprise attack, wandering around ruins, taking Earth back. I don't have any real point to make about this, but I did think it was interesting to note. I forgot to mention that before you wake up from your ridiculously high fall off the ship, which may I add is a bizarre way to set up this scene, seeing as it was just established that Guardians can now die for good, and no one could survive a fall from that high. I guess his armor
That was a
protected
win,
him
but it's
or
kind of
something.
boring, so
Anyway,
I don't know
you
if
have
I'll
a vision
upload
that
it.
shows some vague imagery of the Traveler defeating some triangles with a bird flying around. The purpose of this vision is to show your Guardian that there is a shard of the Traveler that's crashed on Earth somewhere, and also to continue to sow the seeds for another game or DLC or something. I really don't like it when games or movies use itself as a platform to set up future sequels. I'd much rather be left saying that I want more over them constantly telling me that there is going to be more and that I should stick around and be excited. Just shut up and tell me the story of this game before you move into DLC or sequel territory, please. Otherwise, I'm going to continue to not care. And believe me, I already do
Why
not
is
care.
+1 so much of a...
You're alive.
of a bar?
Thought I lost you. I can heal you.
Oh, I did steal the dragon, so that was kind of
You
cool.
wander through the abandoned wastelands of Earth in search for basically anything friendly. Luckily,
Alright,
there's a
I'll
bird
see
that
you
keeps
guys.
appearing that points you headed in the right direction. I read comments from people saying there is more story.
It's a little
What the hell was Ang Lee thinking with this movie? Like, how much weirder and off the wall can you get with a movie about the Hulk? He's a big green dummy, stop treating him so seriously for God's sake. At least Nick Nolte did a good job playing the homeless murderer. Wait a minute, I'm talking about the wrong movie, aren't I? Sorry, I mean, they're so similar, you can't really blame me, can you? The Amazing Bulk is a death sandwich. I don't even know what that means. After the despair of watching this movie, I had to set it aside for a good couple of days to let it sink in a bit. To somehow find a way to summarize, rationalize, and evaluate what the hell I just saw. It's fucking awful though, I'll tell you that much. From the clips here, you're probably thinking to yourself, huh, that isn't the movie, right? Come on. That can't be the actual movie. Like, I know it's called The Search for the Worst, but come on, this has to be a joke. And you're right, this movie is a joke. It's just a shame that the joke isn't very funny. Every single shot left me scratching my head, because trying to apply any sort of reasonable explanation to the inexplicable choices made by the director here is nigh impossible. And here's why. This is going to be a long and angry one here, folks. Strap yourselves in.
What's up, Doc?
I'll bulk you in a minute if you're not careful. The idea is simple. Scientist man is testing out an experimental serum for building muscle mass, but his experiments go horribly wrong and he's turned into a big purple monster. It's the exact same story as The Incredible Hulk, pretty much. It says on the box that this is one of the most talked about cult superhero movie mockbusters ever made. Which is a lie, because no one has heard about this movie, because it sucks. The only reason I found out about it is because this guy called The Amazing Bulk on Twitter has continuously asked me to make a video about it for so long now. So eventually I thought I'd check it out. That was a mistake. So they're trying to sell it ironically. I guess it's the only choice they have, which makes me hate it even more. I immediately knew what I was getting into when I saw the quote on the front of the box. This is the room of superhero movies, which can basically be boiled down to, this movie is so awful, we cannot think of any other way to sell it to people. So let's just prey on the small demographic of people who ironically watch bad movies because no one else will ever want to see this. I even went to the website from the guy whose quote is on the box. This is an actual excerpt from his review. You cannot enjoy this film fully unless you're high or drunk. Wow, what an endorsement. And this is the guy you put on the front cover of your art. You must be so proud. First, I'd like to dispute the fact that this movie is a spoof or mockbuster of superhero movies. A spoof implies that there is some kind of funny imitation and that tropes and things you'd expect to see in this genre are played around with and flipped on their head for comedic effect. The director might have told himself this when he was in production or filming the movie. It might have been the idea at first, but there is so little going on, and it's so profusely lazy that I don't think it's even fair to judge this thing as even a movie, let alone a mockbuster or spoof, because it's more like something you'd see on YouTube for free, made by a bunch of 10-year-olds with a green screen. Where should the line be drawn on when something can be classed as parody or not? If you're so embarrassed by your own film that you feel the need to compare, willingly sell, and flaunt your movie in comparison to one of the most inept movies of all time, The Room, well, to me that comes across like desperation. You paid some artist to do a flashy, well-done cover that is designed to trick people into watching your pile of shit film on false pretenses, and on top of that, you actively go out of your way to say, well, it's meant to be bad. We didn't have the budget to make it good.
Kind of put our heads together and we kind of brainstormed a little bit. So we came up with this idea of, let's do the Hulk, the Incredible Hulk. We'll do a micro-budget version of that. I wanted it to be a bit of a, a spoof, a parody, because I thought if we take ourselves too seriously, just nobody's going to really buy it.
Then why the fuck are you trying to pull something like this off in the first place? Let's say I wanted to make a mockbuster about the Fast and the Furious movies. I don't have any special effects knowledge. I don't know anyone who is uncharismatic and terrible enough who could play a Vin Diesel type character. I don't even have a car. And the prospect is pointless and impossible unless I approach a studio with a script they think could sell. So guess what? I just don't do it. I don't do it! I probably could shamble some embarrassing shit together, but that would be dumb. And a waste of time, a bit like this movie. Sometimes it's a question of if you should do it, not can you do it. Honestly, what is the point? What are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to convey anything with this movie? It's so vapid that it's driving me mad. The technology is available now for anyone to do anything in terms of indie filmmaking, so the, ooh, we've got a micro budget so we can't make it good thing is not gonna fly with me, Sonny. Nothing in this movie makes any sense whatsoever. This movie makes me want to carve my skin off with a potato peel, blend it into a smoothie, pour it over myself while I'm shaking with rage, then murder a cassowary. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit. I like birds too much to ever do that. Maybe I'll just murder some random old person instead, I don't know. But if you hadn't guessed, I detest this movie. Well, why? It's just a movie. You're just a movie, shut the fuck up. I sat the Amazing Bulk down to interrogate it. I asked, what is artistry, Mr. Bulk? This was its reply. Then I asked, how do you think you could get away with this, Mr. Bulk? To which it replied with,
well, it ain't Barney the Purple Dinosaur!
I'm so bad.
Did Daddy Derek direct this? Really? Comic Sans in your superhero comic book movie mockbuster? Ugh, I wonder if this director has ever actually read a comic before. Remember everyone, to set up your city you need 16 million establishing shots or things might get confusing. Also remember to show completely random shit like this close-up of a puddle with comically huge water droplets falling into it. So this is a hooker. She's a hooker. That's all that matters. She walks around for a bit, but look carefully where she's walking. So this here is the Plaza Cinema. She's strolling right by it, but then in the next shot she's crossing the road, but then in the shot after she's walking towards the Plaza Cinema again. Then she teleports back to another street that was just shown, but then the Plaza Cinema is in the background again in the close-up. This is the actual order of shots in the movie. My head hurts. She goes down an alleyway and is assaulted by some random guy. Then it cuts to a silent reaction of a big purple monster standing there, who's completely randomly moving around like the way animation software interprets motion between two frames. There is no actual animation here, it's just kind of moving around for no reason. Also, what's up with this impossible angle? The purple monster is kind of crudely placed on top of this low upwards facing shot. It's so infuriating to describe, okay? So the purple monster scares the woman who's being assaulted. So the criminal guy freaks out and shoots her in the head.
Oh, he goes.
Then even though he's very clearly facing towards the camera, in the next shot he's facing towards the wall, aiming his gun at the bloodstain which is now leaking grey goo. Who then turns around and then there's the purple monster jerkily moving around again. Then there's this still image of the murderer kind of zoomed in a bit with a stock animation of a pistol firing a shot into the camera. It's just kind of been placed on top of the frame. He's clearly not holding it. Also, that's a completely different type of pistol too. The bullet flies into the monster. Then the guy holds his arms up to imply that he's being attacked, but we don't see anything because I guess that would require actual animation. And then the monster runs away and it looks idiotic and dumb. Fade to black title card, which again is in Comic Sans. Oh my god, that was a 3-minute scene and it was the most tiring, exhausting thing I've ever had to describe to you. Do you understand why this movie is so difficult to talk about now? Where the hell am I supposed to even begin? Literally every single shot in the movie can be broken down like that, but I can't do that because we'd literally be here for 18 hours. It probably has left you with a couple of questions though, that I may actually have answers to. The main one being, hey IHG, why does this film look so bad that it makes my eyes hurt? Well, let me explain. That's because every single shot is either filmed on a green screen or is some random stock graphic or animation the director purchased from some random ass website.
He's gonna back and get a rabbit on.
This is not me making assumptions. These websites are listed in the credits and the director proudly talks about it in the movie commentary.
While researching the film, I discovered numerous online sites where I was able to purchase and download these various images.
So the creative process of this movie was to attempt to assemble something tangible around already existing stock graphics and animation that he could crudely shove green-screened actors into. Yes, it's that backwards, it's that simplistic, and it's that cynical. Oh, there's some shots of a city at night. Let's make a hooker walk down it. Oh, there's this footage of a theme park. Let's have a scene where a couple of characters go to the theme park for no reason. Oh, these assets look like a wine cellar. Fuck it, let's just set a scene in there. The majority of this movie was not even made by the filmmakers. Are you starting to see why I hate this so much now?
What have I done? What have I become?
I mean, maybe it would be okay if it was actually funny, but I don't find it funny, because the longer the movie goes on, the more insulting and fleeting it becomes. Okay, so let me attempt to describe what actually happens in the movie. I won't go into quite that much detail again unless necessary, but stick with me here because this is unbelievably difficult. You know, usually things such as awful continuity, shitty angles that make no sense, terrible effects, cringy acting, atrocious dialogue are ideally few and far between, or at least you'd hope so in an average movie. So in a normal movie, when they come up, it's fun to point at and make fun of it. But every single shot in the movie is like this, so it gets boring. It gets boring fast. Look at this stop transition that plays as soon as the title is over. Like, come on, that's so lazy and distracting. So a couple of investigators are checking out the dead body of the hooker.
Hey Lisa, take a look at this. What do you make of it?
They reuse that awkward upward-facing angle again too, and when this guy walks into the scene, it does nothing but highlight how fake and fucking awful it looks. They find some guy's wallet, which leads into their next clue. Okay, so if you were the director of this movie, how would you end this scene? I'm gonna give you 3 options. One of them is true and actually does happen in the movie. Try and guess which one. Number 1, cut to a million different establishing shots. Number 2, logically imply where the investigators are going by showing them driving down a road or something that makes sense. Number 3, randomly, and for no reason at all, have a stock animation of ambulance doors closing over the scene and driving.
Living with schizophrenia can feel overwhelming. People think that I can't have a career, but
off in a confusing way that makes no sense.
But I
I'll give you a
can't.
second to think.
What do you make of it?
It was lying next to the suspected mugger.
What do you make of it?
I bet we're gonna find out soon enough.
What do you make of it?
You guessed it. It's number 1. Oh wait, sorry, it's number 3. There's an ambulance for no reason. So I guess because the director likes Quentin Tarantino, or any number of directors that like to play around with the timeline of their movies, it cuts to one day earlier, where a plane flies over the ocean, then there's an establishing shot of the building. Then there's another screen transition where a microscope flies into the camera. What am I supposed to take away from that? It's so fucking frustrating because I want to apply logic and meaning to what he's trying to say with this shit, but I know the answer is that he just happened to find some stock graphic on some random website. So he figured, oh, I'll just throw that one in, why not? So these guys are supposed to be super secret government scientists, despite the digital set looking like a school science lab, because I guess that's all you could find. For some reason, the main character, which is this guy by the way, he's so goddamn serious all the time, and he keeps doing this face that reminds me of Jeff Daniels. Also, the audio in this movie is so tinny and echoey.
Heightening the immune system, increasing speed and strength.
It sounds like it was recorded in a room that had really terrible acoustics. Kind of like my bedroom.
Great acoustics, everybody!
Oh no,
The
don't
director
die.
explains in the commentary that he left this boxy audio in because it was easier and was more fitting, or something. What?
The audio just bounces all over, so you get this really kind of an echoey, kind of a boxy sound. Because again, we were on a limited budget, we didn't have the resources to do the entire movie. Any of the interior scenes we actually left as is, because in an interior scene, it might have a little bit of that echoey, boxy kind of feel.
I don't have too much burst
so I was
yet.
less concerned with those scenes.
So the main dude's girlfriend shows up in the super secret lab to surprise him, and they go for a romantic walk/run in the park. I purposefully haven't shown you it yet because I wanted to say this with each shot. Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you.
You do still want children, don't you?
Are you trying to tell me something?
Oh my god, it's so awkward. Where the hell did this come from? So it's back to the lab, where they forgot to even place the CG rat inside the case. So it's artlessly plopped on top of the scene and looks shit. You know what?
Blitzcrank
It
is so
doesn't
far
look shit.
behind.
It fits
I don't know why he's still
perfectly. It fits
backing.
perfectly because everything in this movie looks shit. Stock graphic animation montage. Science! So the main stroppy, pouty, fish-faced guy goes to see his girlfriend's dad, hey, nice water fountain, to ask permission to marry her.
I would love to marry your daughter. Wait.
I guess she lives in the same house as her dad, despite being 30 years old. Wait, why do you need permission to marry her? Surely it's between you two. Why do you have to ask him? Is that like a religious thing?
I hate dust. I don't want it building up in my home.
Hi, Daddy.
You let dust build up, and before you know it, you've got an army of dust bunnies plotting to take over. Beautiful flowers. Where did you get those from? Our garden? I hate dust.
Okay, so apart from that being the weirdest, most stilted and uncomfortable scene I've ever witnessed, I'm not sure what part of it is more confusing to me. The fact that he's holding his dusty finger up like a mental patient, or the fact that he stands around by himself saying that he hates dust.
I hate dust. I hate dust.
You find out that the sad fish-faced main character is working for the army man, I guess.
Making progress on the experiment, are we?
Look, it's pretty much the exact same dynamic as Bruce Banner and the army dude from the Hulk. You get it. You know what's going on, kind of. I very much enjoy how they have to pretend to walk on the spot by gently swaying side to side.
Want a drink? No, thanks.
Can't move.
I need results, Hank.
This is so embarrassing. So he asks if he can marry her daughter, and the army dad gets all pissy and effectively blackmails Fishface by saying that he cannot marry his daughter unless he sees results from the crazy science experiments. Okay, so you know what? All of that is like fine. It's shitty and terrible and the worst, but at least there's some kind of weak setup and loose motivation going on. But then out of fucking nowhere, there's a stock graphic bat transition and a spooky castle, and then this girl comes in with a blonde wig, and there's this CG dog and some guys with spears and a shield, despite wearing regular jeans. What in God's name is happening? Then the dog lies on its back and wriggles around. Then this weird cartoon character villain waddles in and is awkward and painful and boring. And the worst thing ever, I hate. Then he shoots the guard with a ray gun, which turns him into a skeleton. I guess that's why they dressed him in that outfit, because he already had the skeleton death animation ready. Fucking lazy asshole. Then it gets even more awkward, because these two characters talk like a bunch of sexual innuendo. It's very uncomfortable.
Would you like something, big?
Yes.
Would you like something, hard?
Yes. Yes.
And what is that? Why is there a monkey there? Why is that in this movie? What is going on? What does any of this have to do with anything? Why is that on the TV in the background? I feel sick. So then there's another montage, this time with missiles flying into famous monuments all around the world. But then it like straight away cuts away to a theme park where there's a bunch of stock graphics and distracting animation, and the worst roller coaster green screen thing you've ever seen. Do you know how tempted I am to just stop right now? But I gotta keep going, I gotta. Because believe it or not, it gets even worse. It transitions to an empty moving train where the murder guy from the beginning of the movie comes walking at them with a gun and then he mugs him on a moving train. Like, where the fuck you go? Where is he going? The train is still moving. He's just running away to another carriage.
He's letting me build up my
Get this.
passive for
In the next shot, they're in a fucking sports car. Why were they on the train? Why? No. Fuck you! Then he has an argument with his girlfriend and retreats back to the lab, where he makes a dead plant come back to life. So being the thoughtful scientist that he is, he immediately injects the new serum into his arm and morphs into the Bulk. Then it shows the opening scene of the movie again. He mentions in the commentary how, for micro-budget films, it's more cost-efficient to find ways of reusing shots.
When making a low-budget movie, it is always useful to figure out ways to reuse the same footage, since this will save you both time and money.
There's another scene with the villain guy, but I'm just gonna fast forward it because I hate it so much. The investigators go to see the fish face guy and eventually come to the conclusion that he's a murderer because the bald guy got purple gunge on his hand.
I didn't get this from the peanut butter and jelly sandwich I had for lunch today.
Randomly, Fish Face wanders down in his pajamas to the crime scene and then he morphs into the Bulk. Worst action scene you've ever seen in the history of anything takes place. They run around in circles for like 1 billion hours, it looks terrible, and it's super boring. And it just doesn't end. And I want to die. Please just let me die. Then the movie has the audacity to try to develop these random-ass characters who we've never seen before.
Oh, that's right, I can pull off other people's moves.
What's that?
Okay, so that last part about the new characters being introduced, that was all a lie. That entire shot was made in my living room with the Jar Media cast in about 30 minutes. When shots from your movie are that easy to replicate, especially with that type of minimal effort, you should really be embarrassed.
I know, right? Who would have thought in my own city that my family would not be safe?
What is split screen doing?
And the action just keeps going and going. And then that lady gets squashed, which I guess is pretty funny.
Look out!
Hey look, it's another angle that makes no sense. Oh fuck it, I don't even care anymore. This news team comes flying in on a helicopter,
vastly
and then for no reason the
overestimating my
Bulk
damage.
suddenly turns into a giant man who's been painted purple. You know, I wish the film had more of this type of stuff in it, because that's kind of charming in its shittiness. In the behind the scenes, you can see the unaltered shots with the bald guy grabbing at tiny plastic toys. It's pretty great. I'm pretty sure it's this dude from the movie as well. Finally, the Bulk collapses and is sent to prison, where he's strapped up and taken away for some super secret testing.
Quick, give me the injection before he fully transforms!
Wait, is that what I think it is?
The power of the Hulk could be yours when you need it with Hulk Hands. Hulk Hands, hear them roar. With all the thunderous sounds of the Hulk built in.
Yeah. Hey, it's this guy again. I love his scenes. He wants to blow up the moon now.
And blow up the moon!
You really could do that?
Whatever. This part I just hate so much.
Oh wait, that's me.
I hate it so much that I don't even want to read the script to you right now. I hate it. It's that much. But here we go. There's a 4-minute segment of random stock graphic spaceships moving around. And for some fucking reason, the director, who also edited the movie, randomly reverses the animation. I can only assume it's supposed to imply something sexual, or he was super bored while he was editing. I mean, this is the kind of shit I used to do when I made videos, so I can't blame him, honestly. Can you please tell me what this means? It's driving me insane. I've analyzed the scene.
I think I triggered a heal out of the cave there. So, you know, Ultimate does do something occasionally.
Someone burned down your house with you inside. Do you know
It's all about that NASA Swither, though, that carried me that fight.
Ask this woman to come work in our house? You don't even know her.
Sometimes you have to scorch everything to start over.
Are you just gonna pretend nothing happened?
Where is he?
We all have parts that scare us.
They just sold to scare us? We all have parts that swain on. There's no scuttle for me to farm, so I'm just gonna sit here.
Please explain it to me. So, oh my god, out of nowhere, the final act is masterfully built up to, and everything starts to make sense. And by make sense, I mean it's still as fucking retarded as ever. In fact, now is when things start to get so brain dead that I feel like explanation is nearly impossible. But hot damn, I'm gonna use the power of friendship to try my very hardest, everybody. So the army man wants to use the bulk to stop the villain from blowing up the moon, so they drop him in the spooky woods, and he runs, and he runs. Meanwhile, this happens.
You should have canceled that earlier, honestly.
Don't even question it, just accept it and move on. We're nearly at the end now. So he walks past a rock, he walks past a guy in the mountains playing golf, he walks past a leprechaun. Okay, dude, you clearly do not care anymore. Wind farm, hilariously oversized fence, castle. I went on the deleted scene section of the DVD. And usually when you watch a deleted scene, you can safely say, oh, I see why they cut that out. Like maybe it was messing with the pacing or it was the wrong tone or something. But there's this deleted scene of like this toy dragon thing. And I have to ask, what about this scene leaves the director saying to himself, nah, this needs to be cut. Doesn't feel right. I mean, the leprechaun was fine, but this is too much. Okay. So then the fish face guy, he tries to get mad and turn into the bulk, but he can't do it. So he pulls this really innocent photograph from out of his pocket of the dude who plays the army guy. He's not even in his army costume, it's just like a random picture. And that's enough to trigger him into turning into the bulk.
I hate dust.
And then the bulk runs around a lot and there's a boulder and he chases a guy and a giant foot squashes him. Then an alien flies down from space and they're in the warehouse with an alien. And then I guess this woman is blindfolded and she feels the bolt's willy by accident. Then there's a goblin walking through the cave with the dog. Then the bulk's giant foot squashes the villain. But then the army bomb the castle and betray the bulk. And now they want to kill him. So then the bulk does what he does best, baby, and he runs. And he runs and runs and runs some more. I guess this was the point where the director just ran out of any reasonable stock graphics to use, because Robin Hood shoots at him, there's a kangaroo and a koala, some flamingos, a bunch of World War II planes, some animals on the swings, some fat kid on a seesaw, like a lizard on a laptop, there's a guy in a biplane who does a cool spin, there's a girl playing football, a pirate ship, another kid playing football, and then there's this thing. Zeus throws a lightning bolt at him, that's pretty cool. And there's this lizard who's just chilling out on a submarine, I guess. This hunter guy sniffs some bear tracks. That's relevant. And there's this flying dog. That's cute. And then there's the lizard on the laptop again. And then a bomb falls on him and he dies. But then it turns out he's not dead. He gives the ring to his girlfriend, has a fight with the army guy, and they both fall off the balcony and die. Then his girlfriend, wife, person visits the grave, she leaves, and then the police dude from earlier shows up and takes a wee-wee on his grave. Then a pair of Hulk hands punch him in the face at the end. Holy shit! There's trying and failing and trying to fail. So I guess because I hate myself and my time has no value to me whatsoever, I decided to watch the entire movie commentary with the director. I thought it was going to be a fun old time, but it wasn't. The director boringly sits there for an hour, effectively listing off a bunch of excuses as to why the movie is so bad, and how you shouldn't get mad at it because it's just satire, and how they didn't have a budget so it's the best they could do, and it's a spoof, so who cares? The following is why the point about not having a budget is wrong, and why you should be embarrassed. Robert Rodriguez is like the king of cheap movies. His first movie, El Mariachi, was made for $7,000 fucking dollars. Ooh, but that's not a genre movie. That's not fair to compare. Well, my favorite comedy from like the last decade, called What We Do in the Shadows, was a Kickstarter project that was made without a studio. And sure, some recognizable names are attached, but it was a labor of love and it really shows. They also have talent and ideas. Also, it's a funny comedy, non-ironically. like it actually has jokes, unlike this piece of trash. So according to the director, the footage was filmed in 2008 and it only took 5 days to shoot because it was all on a green screen wall they painted. It was like filming a play.
Who said to me afterwards, he said, you know, Louis, he said, this was more like doing a play.
Then right before the fucking awful 15-minute chase scene at the end, he just stops the commentary and the movie plays in silence for the rest of the running time. He doesn't comment on anything interesting at all. $14,000 was the budget and a year and a half of editing time was committed to this. And on IMDb it says it came out in 2013, so it was already out of date and irrelevant before it came out. Let's just sell it as an ironic parody for all the hipsters who watch bad movies. That'll work. What other options do we realistically have? I was super interested in hearing him justify all the random shit in the movie, especially that scene in space with the reversing, but it's like he just ignores it. There's this one part where he's talking about how he storyboarded the movie, while there's a CG monkey just standing there in the background. You can look at some of the storyboards on the DVD, and the storyboards look identical to the final product. That's so fucking terrible. That's not supposed to be what they're for, man. It's not. He says something like he didn't choose for the final chase scene to be like it is, with all the random shit in it.
Final chase scene at the end of the film where he's escaping as the Bulk. I didn't choose those, you know, a lot of those sequences, so I had to do that research and find those shots.
Like what? That doesn't make any sense.
I don't even know who I killed.
Director.
Oh, I guess I got a double.
What are you talking about? He admits that a grand total of 6 shots were custom produced for the movie. Everything else was pre-made.
He could write the script around his location because it could only be based on what I could find that was available. Again, none of this, there's very little that I actually had produced. I said maybe about half a dozen shots. I had hired some graphic people to make shots for me. Everything else was, you know, as I described, as kind of like off the shelf.
Movies can be made up of literally thousands of shots. But let's just say for the sake of argument, a typical movie is 1,000 shots on average. That means this is 0.6% a movie that was made. Why should this movie get a pass just for being a spoof and quite frankly being terrible and lazy on purpose? When movies like The Room, Troll 2, even The Garbage Pail Kids, at the very least, are movies.
Oh, wow.
Their movie making, while shoddy in those examples, well, at least it was movie making. This shit, it's such a joke that I don't think it's even fair to compare it to something like The Room. The Room only works because it's so unaware. It's the perfect storm of terrible, awkward awfulness that can be ironically loved and appreciated. The Amazing Bulk was like watching a bunch of people who don't care holding their middle finger up to me and effectively saying, "It's just a prank, bro. It doesn't matter. It's just a parody." Usually I can find something to appreciate in bad movies. I see it like a learning experience. Why doesn't it work?
I greeted
Usually
for the
it is down to
extra
something pretty
passive
simple.
sec.
A lack of focus, a lack of experience or knowledge or intuition. Someone crazy is at the helm. The script is bad or generic or weird. Too much studio involvement. But everything is wrong with this movie. The problem is that they were defeatist and didn't give a single shit from the get-go. Not one thing is done right. The only credit I could give it is that you've made a movie that exists and can be bought. But it's embarrassing, and it would be something I personally would hide instead of being proud of. They say no one sets out to make a bad movie. The director even says it in the commentary.
I never set out to purposely make a bad movie. In fact, nobody ever sets their sights on making a bad movie.
But all I hear is a bunch of excuses. It's not funny, it has no point. It's not ironic to enjoy
That
The
was-
Room, it's a waste. And I'm sorry if I've offended you if you're watching this, like director man, but I hate this movie. It's the worst movie I've ever seen. It's so awful that I'm going to put an asterisk on the cover of this movie in the order section.
Yeah, I really like this
explaining
Champion
that it hardly
W.
even counts
It's like
because I don't think
my
it can
favorite
even
thing
be
about it.
classed as a movie in my opinion. Let me just throw a bunch of stupid
Also, the
shit on the
passive
screen
is
to
pretty
distract you
neat
for a bit.
when you
Isn't
got
this
his act.
ironic? Isn't this a lol parody for us all to enjoy? Why don't you buy it on DVD? I didn't have the budget to make a real video for you guys, so I thought I'd just throw a bunch of random stock footage and graphics on the screen. You see my point? The movies are special to me. They can teach you things, make you laugh, make you cry, distract you from your shitty life for a few hours. It's why I started this series in the first place. Even bad movies can be great, but this is exactly why I hate The Amazing Bulk so much. When the movie was over, I hadn't learned anything. I didn't get any enjoyment even on the most superficial or ironic level. It didn't even really teach me anything about what shouldn't be done with movie making, because that would imply that there is movie making going on in the first place. You might be saying, oi, prick. Stop taking this dumb movie so seriously. No, you shut up. That's exactly what the director wants, and I will not stand for it. There's no excuse for this. There's no excuse. And I almost feel like I deserve an apology for spending so much time analyzing this boring waste of a movie.
I could have cast it, but I
And
didn't
up
want to.
next in the search for the worst is... I'm not even gonna look. I don't care what it is. It cannot be worse than The Amazing Bulk, so fuck it. So those are my thoughts on The Amazing Bulk. holy fucking shit. Each time they just get worse and worse. Like, I cannot believe this movie. I cannot believe it. If you want to see me, like, genuinely going insane, I'd suggest trying to watch for this episode, because it was like my genuine first reaction of me trying to decipher it, trying to, like, relate to it in some way. If you're trying to analyze this film, it's so fucking frustrating because nothing makes any sense. So what do you think? Did you like my video? Did you dislike the video? Do you think the movie looks entertaining? Did you agree with me?
They're arguing about stuff while we ace their whole team.
Dude, whatever it is, tell me in the comments.
Classic.
And as always, thanks for watching. All comments and ratings are very much appreciated. My voice is just so dead right now. This is over an hour of audio recording so far, pre-editing. Make sure you check out the Search for the Worst playlist, Trying to Watch playlist in the description and on links here.
Maybe I'll rush Snatchers next game.
Podcasts and craziness, whatever. Just
or after
I'll see you next time.
So it's not really a rush. The Jin's W's were pretty solid. That's why I gave him that honor. Although I probably should have honored Zach. Get an S for some reason.
I hate this.
No. Yes.
At Cracker Barrel Cheese, we're choosy about our cheese. Because you're choosy about your cheese. Cracker Barrel Cheese. A refined cheese for refined tastes.
Remember to stretch, guys. It's important. Did Bot lose? They didn't lose that hard. Oh wait, yeah, they did. 3 kill participation. That's pretty bad. With Caitlyn, you could just ult late game. Let's see what we got here. Soraka, LeBlanc, and some blue essence. Not too exciting. I'll see you guys in the next one.